Welcome to Legal Innovation Spotlight, the podcast that brings you the latest advancements in legal tech and knowledge management. I'm Ted Theodoropoulos, and I connect with the industry's brightest minds to provide you with valuable insights and actionable takeaways. So sit back, relax, and let's dive in.
Rodney, how are you this afternoon?
I'm doing great. It's a nice kind of slightly rainy day here in St. Louis, Missouri.
And you know what? I'm just around the corner from you, so
I know that's how we connected. I was listening to one of your podcasts, and all of a sudden I hear you talking about St. Louis, and I'm like, holy cow, he's in St. Louis. And I think I sent you LinkedIn. I didn't, have a way to contact you, so I messaged you through LinkedIn, and we connect, and we've had a couple breakfasts since, and here we are.
And we had some really interesting conversations during those breakfast meetings, and
absolutely,
which is why I really wanted to get you on the podcast. So I know you're a busy guy. I appreciate the time. Well, let's get you introduced. So you've been 30 plus years in big law. You've been 15 plus years at Ogletree Deacons, and you lead the firm's innovation council. Like, give us a little bit of background on, what your rise up the ranks and kind of what you're doing today.
Yeah, sure. So, I started, I've been started at a big regional law firm in Kansas City, moved to St. Louis and was at a big regional firm in St. Louis, just honing my craft. I have a background as primarily an airline and railroad lawyer, representing airlines and railroads. So it's always been in the employment space. And it's always been on the management side. So that's all I've done my entire career. In 2008, Ogletree Deacons had just opened about 6 months earlier in St. Louis. And a bunch of my peers at other firms who I had worked with, and 3 of whom I went to law school with, were making the transition to Ogletree. So I made the jump as well. Continued to sort of hone my craft, and then that sort of evolved into business development, and became a business developer and developed a large number of clients. And then 3 years ago, or 4 years, 3 years ago, went on our board of directors. So I'm on our firm's board of directors, which is 6 of us. And then 4 years ago, took over as the chair of the Innovation Council, which is just a group of multiple different people within the firm. But, my career has sort of evolved as a lot of people, from practitioner to business developer to now someone who is probably a little bit more interested in how we as a firm do business. Still tied to the practice and still work with clients all the time, but really focused on the business aspect of, what could we do better as a business?
And how much of your time is focused on that versus the practice?
I always like to say that, 80% of my day is servicing clients, 80% of my day is doing firm stuff, 80% of my day is business development, and 80% of my day is innovation related. Kidding aside, I kind of depends on the week, but the Innovation Council and the innovation piece is a lot. I not only do I chair our firm's Innovation Council and sort of help provide strategic direction. I'm sure we'll get into how we do it, but also, I've been to 3 offices in the last 2 months to do an in-person lunch and learn about innovation for 2 hours. I do online webinars. We tend to find that lawyers teaching lawyers about the benefits of using Harvey, for example, is a good thing. So I do that as well.
And what was the catalyst? Like, what really pushed Ogletree Deacons? And you guys have been clients of ours for a long time, 7+ years, and back all the way back before we were InfoDash, we were AcroWire back then. So I've had a bird's eye view and have seen the growth, and it's been exciting to watch, and it's been fun to partner with you guys. But I'm curious. I can only see so far into the firm. Like, what was the nexus? Like, what started the firm's conversation around innovation?
I think it's not. I like to think we've done it very, very well, but I think like most firms, it started with the traditional knowledge management role. Patrick DiDomenico, who I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, was our chief knowledge management officer and just a fantastic expert in this area. And, I worked a lot with Patrick, but at the start, it was a traditional knowledge management function where we're taking the collective knowledge of, at the time, probably 400 lawyers and others who are doing things and not in silos, but, we're a very dispersed firm, right? We're not 1,100 lawyers sitting in one building. We're 1,100 lawyers sitting in 60 some plus offices. So, it was that traditional role. And then I would say the first, we had some portfolio clients where you're getting a flat fee and innovation plays a special role, I would say, because, financially, as everybody, leverage is your key to profitability. And, you raise rates or you improve your leverage. And, if you have a flat fee, you really focus on leverage versus going to the client and saying, hey, we're doing things really, really poorly. Can you please pay us more? It's usually not a good client development strategy. So, the use of document automation, some of the earlier adoptions of innovation in law firms, particularly on the tech side. And we sort of did that. And then, we're labor and employment. So you got, when the federal government's not really making significant changes, you got states that are constantly changing the rules and things of that nature. So, in order to scale that in a sort of way to generate revenue, we started with this OD comply concept, which is there were a number of top background checks, wage and hour, various topics that really were ripe for kind of developing some type of online platform where you can select a state, you can, and that now has evolved into our current client portal, which you might be familiar with. Yep. But that sort of was the early, and then there was some early AI, Legalmation with Answers and other sort of products that were sort of early promoters of the use of AI in the legal tech space. Then COVID comes along, and now you are scaling beyond belief. And innovation is about scaling is a huge part of innovation, in my opinion, where you are trying to take something that you can, templates, things we were doing during COVID, and the demand was through the roof as states were grappling and or clients were grappling with, what to do during the pandemic. And then coming out of that, OD Comply evolved to the client portal, and then it just started taking off. I kind of view innovation as sort of like, I don't know, it's an upward curve. And, we've always said we went from books to Westlaw. We went from, computer processors to, computers you took home. We went from, everything has been innovative, but we're now on an upward trajectory that I've never seen in 30 years of practice, and I don't think anybody has seen. And that expertise in that innovation function becomes all the more paramount because a lawyer who's practicing can't keep track of everything. You just can't. You need experts in the field.
And then what made you take the role? Like, what did you just gravitate towards that sort of discipline, or did the firm tap you on the shoulder and go, Rodney, we think you'd be the guy? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember when I made the move from my prior firm to Ogletree, the managing partner at the firm told me that he thought I was entrepreneurial, which I don't know if that was a valued thing or not. I still haven't figured that out. But I've always I thought differently. I view myself as much of a project manager as I do a lawyer. I like to think I'm a good lawyer. I've tried cases. I think clients respected the advice I gave and viewed me as a partner, and I did the practice of law very, very well. But, I remember, I look back at your innovator versus lawyer mindset post. And, while I certainly have many of the traits of a lawyer, I like to think that I'm a future looking. I clearly have a bias toward action. I'm sort of the belief that, 99% of the mistakes I'm going to make are fixable, and moving with some velocity is a lot more important You got to be mindful of the ones that are not fixable and not make them, or just hope that you don't. But I'm okay with failure. I think failure is the only way you learn. And I like to be in a constant state of change. Like, I'm comfortable with things changing all the time. Like, there is no end. Anybody who tells me that there's some like end goal, I don't think is being innovative. You have to be willing to live in a constant state of flux. And I was fortunate to have several clients who fostered that in their business and wanted their outside counsel to think like that. Your podcast, I've never done. I don't know the person from DHL. I was listening to the podcast, but I was fortunate to have clients like that who really drove you to be forward thinking, to be innovative. They wanted flat rates. They wanted you to push you to find ways to deliver better product, the better product at less cost to them. And they challenged you to do that and make more money for you. So at the end of the day, you might be getting less revenue, but instead of spending $1.20 to generate $1, you're spending 80 cents to generate $1. And they wanted you to really drive that. And, that is the thing that got me involved. And I think that mindset also led me to sort of push from a lawyer-centric, lawyer-driven innovation strategy at Ogletree to one where it's professionally driven by Dave Bolin and Tim Fox at our firm. Innovation has to be in the hands of professionals. We play a valuable, indispensable role, but we shouldn't be the ones out there truly just driving it.
I completely agree with that. It's great to hear that. I think that a couple of things. I think that law firm leadership and I've worked with 110 AM law firms, and that's when I stopped counting, because counting gets difficult when firms merge. And so I quit counting at 110. It's probably it's certainly more than that by now in the 17 years that I've been working with InfoDash and AcroWire. And so I've had a really good cross-sectional view of how law firms do things, especially in the KM, IT, now innovation. Innovation didn't exist really 10 years ago. It was brand new. In fact, I did a little analysis of the ILTA roster. In 2014, there were 16 people who had the word innovation in their title, and none of them were C-suite. I think there was 2 directors. So it was brand new. And I've talked a lot about the innovation theater that has happened in legal, where law firms have wanted to look innovative, but weren't necessarily committed to the change necessary to really move that forward. And it's hard, because I feel like, I don't know if this is your take as well, but like law firm culture has been, the status quo has been very sticky, especially since like the financial crisis recovery, right? Like AmLaw profits have been on the increase every year. It's kind of hard to say, hey, you're doing it wrong, when law firms are performing better every year than they did the previous year. But I don't think that's going to be forever unless we make some pretty serious change around all of this transformation that's taking place. So it's good to hear you say that. And I'm curious, like with the Innovation Council, like who's on it? Like what, not the names, but like the roles. Is it all lawyers?
Yeah, so the Innovation Council is it's a group of lawyers. They typically are going to be lawyers who have more client exposure. It's not just because you're a top business generator in our firm, you're not on the Innovation Council. You have to be somebody who's got a portfolio of clients where you use innovation. It's generally people who are respected in the firm. So to the extent they're out there trying to push change management, which I'm sure we'll talk about, awareness and adoption and education, which is, before we started, I said, there's a couple challenges. One is, people's personal interest. You always got to get over those humps when you're trying to, introduce innovation. I always say if you introduce innovation, that kind of a joke I always tell when I speak is, if we came up with something that generated valid time entries that complied with every billing guideline, that captured every second I work, that captured every phase code and task code without me doing a thing. Like I plugged something into my head at the start of the day, and that was it. I would have 150% adoption in my firm, right? That's, again, those are, you have to think about that interest. But, so we have lawyers right now, usually 5. The Innovation Council is probably 10 people. So maybe 4 or 5 lawyers are managing shareholders on it. I'm on it. So we have 2 board members. And then we will have other lawyers who practice. Obviously, our Chief Knowledge and Innovation Officer, and then our Senior Director of Innovation, Tim Fox. They run it. They prepare the pre-read on Tuesday, which has kind of all the projects that are in flight that we're talking about that day, a single slide on all of the projects we have that are in flight if people want to ask about them, and then a bunch of things that are sort of in the hopper that we're currently contemplating. It talks about our strategy, which obviously, we just had we do a 3-year strategic plan, and purposeful innovation is one of our 4 pillars. So we align everything around our strategic plan, and I'm happy to talk about that too. And then all of the our Chief Financial Officer, our Chief Administrative Officer, we're in the process of interviewing and hiring a COO. That person will be on. So pretty much not every single a Chief Client Service Officer. We try to include all of them. Our Chief, our CIO is on it. The idea is that innovation happens everywhere. It's not confined to lawyers. It's not only client facing. It happens everywhere. If we can innovate to improve billing within the billing department, or how our AR, our revenue specialists are collecting, that's awesome. But we pulled it all into the Innovation Council, and we pulled it all into our Knowledge and Innovation group to avoid having innovation in silos. We didn't want innovation to happen in silos where somebody doesn't know what somebody else is doing, and you're pulling resources, or you're duplicating efforts, or you're doing something that is inefficient. So that's the team. It's a good group. There's usually 1 or 2 changes every year, but it's a good mix of people. We meet every month, the 3rd Thursday of every month, and we have a I and my co-chair do the pre-review on Tuesday, and then we meet in person once a year.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, this is really good. Yeah, in the 7-ish years we've been working with you guys, from the outside in, it looks like you guys have had about 4x growth on the KM innovation team.
So, yeah, when Dave Bolin started, it was 29 people, and it's 110 today.
So how do you think about ROI on, because people are expensive? How does the firm and the Innovation Council think about ROI with these efforts?
Yeah, so so KM and innovation are one department. We don't have a Chief Innovation Officer and a Chief Knowledge Manager. I don't think of them as 2 different things. I think traditional knowledge management, like the old traditional, like I know you're like, we have our intranet platform that I know we work with you on, which has just evolved fantastically. I mean, what we do with it is remarkable. But, introducing some type of chatbot into it, so that, which we call ODGPT, all of these things that we're doing that are innovative, they also tie into knowledge management. It's all about how you find and harness the data. It's the work product, which is the old KM, but now it's becoming data. Like, how do we harness data, and how do we use data? I imagine at some point with client permissions, people are going to start selling, or, who knows where data is going to go. But, as a firm, we have so much of it, and that's part of knowledge management. It's also part of innovation. But we look at it as adoption. I think we have 4 pillars that I think we analyze our ROI on: adoption and awareness. How many people, like if we get Harvey licenses, how many people are using it? How many people are really using it? Does that justify the expense of an enterprise license? Um, Lexus Protege, other products that we look at. What's the adoption of those? People got to be aware of it. They got to be educated on it. Two is revenue. Or the second is revenue. When Dave came in, RK and I'll share this stuff. But our knowledge and innovation group, did less than $1 million in revenue. And if you look at revenue, we're talking our data analysts, because we do that work and bill it for, instead of hiring outside forensic, data analytic groups on class actions, et cetera. Litigation support, and our client portal, which is a product that we sell. It went from less than $1 million to over 16 million.
Wow.
And that is recognizing that, you can start to talk more about how we look at innovation. And I think it was on, again, one of your podcasts, I heard somebody talk about it, about sort of the different evolution of innovation. And when you start selling services that you didn't ever think you would sell, that's, to me, that's innovation, right? Doing things differently. I mean, there's little innovation with improving things, making you more efficient, et cetera. But there's so much we can do. And then profitability, a lot harder. I think you always talk about how great firms are at understanding profitability and analyzing it. That's sort of a joke. I mean, every firm struggles. I mean, we sell time, and how do you cost that time, and how do you really look at whether this dollar is worth the same as this dollar? But we do on flat fee matters. Look at when we introduce innovation, we'll do a sort of pre and a post to look at the profitability of that particular project or engagement. And lastly, user satisfaction. We pulse users constantly to get their understand what their pain points are, what they wish they could do, so we could push out better education and training.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's pretty unique that a KM function is, or innovation function is, revenue generating. You don't hear about that a lot. It's not the only time I've heard it, but it's rare. So yeah, what's interesting is I feel like the labor and employment world is somewhat unique in that, at least from an outsider, this is how it looks. So there's about 5 big national firms that I can name, and all of them, it's one of the few practice areas where I've seen firms completely zero in on this type of work and be able to scale to 1,000+ attorneys. I guess there's just so much of it out there, but having those blinders on and really focusing in creates really interesting opportunities, like the client portal, where you guys accumulate all of this data that you can then, hire brilliant data folks like Tim Fox and his team, who's very highly regarded in the industry, to create insights that you can monetize. And I don't know if that's a function of your focus, but I don't see a lot of firms who aren't zeroed in like that be able to pull that together.
Yeah, I think it's a tribute to Dave and Tim and their vision and what they do, and also the support of the firm's leadership in making decisions on flipping the nomenclature from cost to investment. Even that, using that word investment instead of referring to it as a cost, and then obviously convincing lawyers that adopting whatever it is we're using, right? Using Harvey, or whatever it might be, will personally benefit them if you focus on that personal interest, which I think you have to.
Yeah. So here's I'll throw a little bit of a curveball at you. We had a nicely prepared agenda, but you mentioned something that the LinkedIn post about the innovators versus the lawyer's mindset. And I've talked about it before on the podcast, the traits that Dr. Larry Richard, who has spent 35 years and has assessed 40,000 attorneys. He's really got it dialed in on typical traits of lawyers. And then I use the 5 traits of innovator that Mark Andreessen, who is the managing director of A16Z. He was the founder of Netscape. Eventually, he invented the web browser. And I got some really interesting dialogue around that. And then Another post was I talked about Big Law 2.0 and how the partnership model creates some interesting challenges or friction towards innovation, like R&D. Like, I would imagine that on day one, when you hired all these data analysts, they weren't revenue generating. You had to look 2, 3, 4 years out into the future, and the partnership model really prioritizes and your cash basis accounting,
Yeah.
right? Like, so how did you get the support necessary when, as an industry, and I know there's variation within firm to firm, but as an industry, it's really how much can you drive bottom line performance every year? How did you get the firm to come to the table and say, hey, we have to
I don't think
invest?
so. Data analytics is an interesting one because it's you have a class action practice in California, and they are handling mass amounts of class actions. And then all of a sudden, you need to run damage analysis, and the client's okay paying for that. And throughout your history, you've outsourced that, and then you decide, let's try insourcing it, and you insource it, and you have a taste of success, right? All of a sudden, the lawyers who are managing and originating clients who are having these cases in California suddenly see, hey, I've got work that we can do at a competitive, same quality, better pricing than outsourcing. And we are going to go and all of a sudden, the work that we're generating for a particular case, it goes up incrementally. And those people are, well, I got 5 more cases, and they're like, well, we need 3 more data analysts. Well, I have 50 cases. Well, we need 10 more data analysts. So I think you see that grow incrementally. I think what then becomes a whole different discussion that we as a firm have never had. This is Rodney speaking in my own brain, or thinking in my own brain, is, okay, now if we got this great group of people doing it for our clients, why don't we go bottle them and sell them to other firms and get other firms to hire? Now, that might be a challenge. You might not be going to some of our competitors and doing that. They may not be up for that. But you go to in-house, you got this group of people doing something that's competing with these traditional data analytics firms. Why not go do that? It's taking your litigation support team and growing that, and they can be, some cases, revenue generating for certain types of matters. Well, why not see if client will use them for others? Now, we don't do those things. We limit these functions to our clients and the work we're doing. But that's how it happens. I think it happens and you start to see success. And then that success builds confidence in investing for things that might not realize for, a year or two.
So you build financial credibility, essentially.
That's a great way to say it.
Yeah, very interesting. And here's another kind of curveball for you. So we've worked with Dave Bolin since he started, and I thought he was a great hire that you pulled from outside the industry, and I think that has really helped him because he came without all of the, in legal, even in the legal tech world, like in the legal tech world, there is a standard life cycle of companies like ours. They start out small and independent like we are. They get to about 10 million in revenue, and then they sell to one of the big companies. And you know what? I don't want to do that, right? I'm thinking differently, and we have created a board of advisors who come from all sorts of walks of life rather than just legal tech founders, because they have that mindset. Was there any strategy around bringing in people? And you've got a mix. You've got people who are lifers in legal, and then you've got people like Dave who came from public accounting. What is your strategy with that, bringing those different perspectives?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when you are bringing in people who are not practicing lawyers, even if they're lawyers, they have a law degree, but they're not practicing lawyers. I mean, one thing about law firms, and I've heard you talk about this with respect to the big four, is I'm 57 years old. I got 8 years left to practice. I don't think, as long as I am practicing, our firm will be owned and or will be run by lawyers. I mean, I don't see that dynamic. Like, I don't see a firm bringing in an outside CEO. I'm not commenting on that, whether it's a good idea or bad idea, but bringing in an outside CEO to run things and for that person to make decisions rather than consensus-based decision making by a group of lawyers who meet as a board every month. Even having an executive committee of 3 lawyers who, are really involved in sort of the day-to-day decision making. I think you see firms delegating sort of what I would call the things that don't impact the bottom line so dramatically to the professional legal staff that is non-practicing. Obviously Dave Bolin has discretion to make decisions within his budget and things that he's doing for that year. I don't think anybody goes in and micromanages him. So I think you have to have a mix of business people, because we're a business at the end of the day. And you have to have lawyers who are willing to let those business people run their departments, make decisions without micromanaging every decision. On the other hand, you need to have people making those decisions realize that they're making decisions that may impact how lawyers do things. And we're not the most changeable lot of people in the world. I still have colleagues who write their time down on a yellow pad of paper and give it to their practice assistant to enter into the timekeeping system. So you're not the most, we're not the most apt, we're not the best constituents for change management, I guess is the way I would put it. So you need to have that partnership and that trust between those two groups that A, Dave, you're not going to run off and do something that no one's going to use, and B, we're not going to manage every little thing you do. So I think that's the key more than the person in the job.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, that's how I view it.
Yeah. Well, and so law firm, the big law market is extremely fragmented, and you can measure that a number of different ways. You can look at concentration of your top X number of players in the space. If you use, I think the top 5 law firms have about 4% market share overall in total legal spend, whereas the big 4, for example, have 97% of the publicly traded. This is on the audit side. I'm not sure about advisory and tax, but on the audit side, they own it. And scale has not been important in legal thus far. And because it is a bespoke craft, artisan process or practice. And I am of the belief, I'd love to hear your thinking on this, that when we move into this next iteration, this next 2.0 of big law, I think scale is going to be important, because there's going to be, you're not going to differentiate yourself by going out and implementing Harvey or co-counsel, right? What's going to differentiate you is your data and your tech. And if you buy it off the shelf, your competitors have access to it. By definition, that's not differentiating. So I think that scale is going to become more important. And what I have trouble envisioning is how this partnership model accommodates that scale. So when you look at a typical governance, like corporate governance infrastructure, you've got shareholders and they install management, and you've got all sorts of layers of risk management, like inside the line of business, you've got risk management. They call it the second line of defense. You've got internal audit. None of these things exist in law. And I part of that has to do with scale, but to really scale, if you want to be a Fortune 500 company, it is uniform across the board that exists. I'm wondering, how you think about, once we get into this tech-enabled legal service delivery world that we seem to be stepping into, who knows when the switch is gonna flip? But how do you see the current model? A, do you think scale is going to be important going forward? And B, if so, how, if it's just lawyers running the firm, there's no outside capital in these governance structures, how will it accommodate that scale?
Yeah, well, first off, I think you're talking to me in the context of a labor and employment firm. I think it's probably different than if you talk to, a firm that's has more of a general practice, especially like a regional general practice. I mean, scaling, the client portal is scaling, right? Historically, clients would call up and they would have a question about New Jersey wage hour law, and you would handle those one off, and each individual inquiry was handled differently. Somebody needed a form for this or a form for that. Scaling, the client portal is scaling 1.0. It is a classic example of taking all of this information that we have as a firm, building it into a portal, allowing clients to collectively share the costs across the platform. That is scaling. You're doing riffs in a downturn, and you're doing them for hundreds of clients. And having the ability to not only scale the creation of the documents you're going to need, but also and then sell that for a fixed fee. So if I do it on an individualized basis, it's going to cost you $50,000. But here I've got this bespoke product, that you can get it for $500. Again, that's scaling, right? And in our space, it's a little easier to do because I think it's more predictable where these scaling opportunities are going to be. Data collection, you mentioned that. I mean, that's another area where I think there's tremendous opportunity within the legal industry that's been lost. If I right now want to get a sense of how much, Buddy's litigating a case, he wants to, the opening demand's $100,000. He wants to have an idea of where the case might end. You're going to try to find people who've maybe had cases with that plaintiff's counsel. It's going to be off the cuff. Here's my thought. It's probably right 20% of the time and wrong 80% of the time. But if I've got 150 cases that our firm has litigated with this person, and I've collected this data, and I could say, hey, accounting for certain outliers, if this person starts at 100,000, they're going to end at, $47,253 within this confidence level. That's the use of data. And I think you're going to see more of that type of, because now the technology enables you to do that, right? You're not relying on lawyers to look at their yellow pad of paper and enter some information before they throw that yellow pad of paper away. So I think you're going to see it in the current setup of our firm. I think we will achieve that. And I don't think we need a different structure to do that.
Yeah.
For us.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's the case for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys have really niched down. I mean, you do labor and employment, immigration. Is there anything else? Any other?
Nope.
That's it. Yeah.
Labor, employment, immigration.
Yeah. That's a
So it enables us to do that. I mean, when you look at innovation and how it impacts that, I think the challenge is not the scaling. I think the challenge becomes convincing lawyers who all have different interests, like you and I talked about at the beginning, convincing attorneys who have different personal interests. I'm somebody who is compensated based on meeting my billable hour requirement. And I meet it every year, barely. And somebody now comes along and says, hey, here's this tool that's going to cut 200 hours out of your year. You might not be too excited about that. But if I'm a lawyer who bills way too much and I'm looking to find ways to become more efficient and use AI and other tools to reduce my workload so I can deliver better work product, focus on the things where maybe my judgment is more important, it'll be welcome.
Well, so that means internal firm compensation would have to change too, right?
You're going to have to look at, those are the things I think, not so much the governance structure of a firm from being a partnership or having outside leadership, non-lawyer leadership. I think the things that are going to be that are going to, over the next 5 years, you're really going to see a struggle with is every firm is grappling with them. We grapple with them. How do you compensate? What do you value? Do you value just bottom line dollar, or do you care about profitable dollars? And if you care about profitable dollars, how are you measuring profitability? How are you capturing it? What tools are you providing to people to improve profitability and be able to regularly measure it? Every business measures their profitability. They know how much they charge for, they make on things, and they know how much they cost. I don't think every firm has that really nailed down completely. I think different people have different opinions about it. But those are the challenges. And another example, Ted, it's just the last one I'll give is, if I'm somebody who's just starting out developing business, and I've got a client who expects that this handbook is going to cost $10,000 because when they were practicing lawyer, that's how much it cost. And they don't want a flat fee. They want to pay me by the hour. And I go to somebody and I say, hey, why don't you use this handbook builder that we've generated, and you'll be able to generate it. It's only going to take you 1 hour to type in the information, and it'll generate it for you. And they're like, yeah, but I'm only billing by the hour. And the client thinks it's going to take 10. Why in the world would I bill them 1? I mean, that, again, you have those thoughts. And I'm not saying that, as a firm, of course you want to think that everybody would do it as efficiently as possible. But again, you just have these sort of barriers to in addition to lawyers being lawyers, there are institutional barriers to change that you have to just be aware of.
Yeah, for sure. So speaking, we talked a little bit about AI, and, how has AI shaped what you guys do there at Ogletree Deacons in terms of offerings and pricing?
Yeah, I mean, you can give different examples where, and again, it has to be a communication with the client, right? At the end of the day, you got to be communicating. Again, take Legalmation. We were an early user of Legalmation for answers to complaints, and there's a certain flat fee charge that goes with the use of Legalmation that you advise the client of and you pass it through, which is significantly less than the cost of somebody sitting there and generating an answer. If everybody's on board with that, that's great. I mean, it's not like you're using these things and not reviewing them, and that's a problem if you have people do that. But none of our lawyers, our firm is a great firm, and we're always very attuned to making sure that work product is perfect. Because at the end of the day, nothing can affect the product of the work and the service delivered. You're seeing probably more of an education about flat fees and how to flat fee work. To reduce the client's cost. So you're reducing the client's cost. You're reducing the bottom line dollar value that you're bringing into the firm, but you're improving the profitability of that. So if I can go to a client in my handbook example and say, hey, I'll pay you $2,000, I'll charge you $2,000 instead of $10,000, and you're going to get the same exact handbook. And I can do that with the click of a button that takes me 5 minutes. We made $8,000 less, but I've made $2,000 that cost me, $50 to generate. I think the second is much better than the first.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're almost out of time. I wanted to ask one final question about differentiation and how Ogletree Deacons thinks about it. I feel like it's a really important topic, and like I said, am I right? Is there about 5 L&E focused firm, like big one?
Yeah, I mean, there's 5 or 6 that are out there in the marketplace.
Yeah,
I think us and Littler and Jackson Lewis are the 3 largest.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's only a handful that do it nationally or globally.
And how does the firm think about differentiation today when you're competing against these other L&E firms? Like, how do you pitch OD is different, and here's why?
Well, that's a great question. I think you could focus on, it's not what you have. Oh, we have Harvey. Oh, we have Co-Counsel. Oh, we have, Lexis Protege. Oh, we use, this product or that product. It's how are you using it? And how are you using it to deliver better service for less money? You talk about innovation theater, and I think that's a great thing to talk about, because if I just walk around and say, hey, I'm now partnered with X, and we're using, but you don't talk about what you do with it and focus on that, then everybody does that. That's innovation theater to me. But if you really dig into how am I going to use these tools with you as a client to deliver superior performance, better product, quicker, in a way that considerably drops your budget, then you will differentiate yourself versus just talking about what you do.
Yeah. And then what about in the future? Like, obviously, buying, like I mentioned, buying software licenses that everybody else can buy, it doesn't create differentiation. I'm a believer in that some of the things that you're doing, like with your client portal, all of that data. And then, you guys have just signed on as extranet customers of ours. I'm really interested to start to put some Lego pieces together and say, hey, what if you took that client, all that L&E data that you have, and you've got all these employment contracts, and throw Azure OpenAI on top and flag exceptions? Like, I don't know anybody who's doing that. Like, there's lots of interesting recipes. Like,
you got to understand what the demand is with your clients, your demand within your attorneys, your demand within your various departments of the firm, and then you need to build products for them and customize things for what they need. The real challenge, I think, Ted, is that take our intranet, which has evolved. It used to be 95%, it's moving to this world where my personalized space is now getting larger than the firm space, which is what I care about. Yes, I like to see that there's this news alert coming out, but I really want to see the things that matter to me, the clients that I'm working on, the matters that I'm handling, the information that's important to me. And what you really got to realize is that what's important to me is different than what's important to the lawyer sitting in the office next to me. It's different than my practice assistant sitting across the hall from me. We all have things that we want to see. I may care more about billing and collection than I do about how many hours I've billed this month. And you have to build something that speaks to everybody and that they can focus on what's important to them and not be stuck with they're only getting 1/10 of what they really care about because you got to give 1/10 to the other 9 people. That to me is the key.
Yeah.
And that's where I think it's headed. I think it's headed to a much more customized experience for me, the ability for me to customize my experience for my client. And that's going to be critical to us. We don't like to build. We like to partner with firms like yours, companies like yours.
Yeah.
The experts, the people who have the bandwidth to build what we want. And I think you're going to see a demand for things that are usable across lots of different personal interest.
Yeah. Well, this has been good stuff. You're the first. We've had lots of CKOs, CKIOs, CNOs. You're the first. You're the first guest that's on a leadership executive committee, and it's been really insightful. I've really enjoyed having that perspective on the show. So I appreciate you spending a few minutes.
Yeah, no, it's been really, really important. I loved it. I think it was great. I like to geek out on this stuff. And I really think it's the future of our firm. And I think it's just, and the future of the practice. I hope law schools are doing a good job at preparing people. I think you're going to see professions and positions within the legal profession impacted by this in different ways. But I think everybody will be impacted in how they practice over the years to come. There's no way to escape it. And, you're either going to figure a way to be at the forefront of it or you're going to get dropped.
It's going to happen to you or by you. So you choose. This is good stuff. All right, Rodney, I really appreciate the time. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us today.
That's great. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Legal Innovation Spotlight. If you found value in this chat, hit the subscribe button to be notified when we release new episodes. We'd also really appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate us and leave us a review wherever you're listening right now. Your feedback helps us provide you with top-notch content.